This section moves away from the Disney princess and focuses on the other main characters that do not receive the attention they deserve. Not only are the Disney villains some of the most memorable Disney characters, but they are also a franchise analogous to the Disney Princess franchise. Within Disney films, the villains, subjectively speaking, make the films what they are: adventurous, action-filled, and enjoyable. Evil, at least within the Disney universe, is far from unspectacular. Instead, it comprises theatrical musical solos, elaborate attire, and occasionally an extreme overreaction leading to attempted murder. This section will examine how the villains are represented as queer characters. I once again use a fan-made video that encapsulates the idea, but it should be noted that I'm writing the entire dissertation on this topic, so while the video does a great job at explaining the basics, there is much more to discuss about the villains as queer. Important to recognise here is that although representation of gender seem to be improving in Disney as time progresses, queerness is still pretty synonymous with villainy.
Oh, hey, are we finally doing the big gay Disney episode?
Oh, good, the straw man's here.
Wait, what?
Straw man.
I don't want to be the straw...
Someone's got to be the straw man. Sorry.
Let's see. Really? You are reading way too much into this. Why you got to read gay where clearly there was not meant to be any?
Disney is a unique company. You seldom see companies with such an easy to recognize and define persona, and with this persona, they sort of inadvertently developed a unique relationship with the gay community.
From a business perspective, they're one of the most gay-friendly companies in the country. They offer benefits to partners of LGBT employees and allow gay days at the Disney parks. Their work itself even has a fairly significant gay fan base.
Many a drag queen has been inspired by the likes of Cruella de Vil, Maleficent, or Ursula, fitting since that last one was inspired by a drag queen herself. Tinkerbell has also something of a gay following.
I think it has something to do with being a strong, independent fairy. She's like a sassiness elemental.
And maybe you've seen fan art like this, or this. Let's get down to business indeed. So, in light of the goodwill between Disney and the gay community, there are certain elements in their animated movies that film academics and queer theorists find noteworthy. Such as...
Oh, I shall practice my curtsy.
Body language. Ha!
And wondrous things like the Tower Bridge job. When they see how I glitter.
You're so weird.
You have no idea.
Well, so we are going to make a thing out of it. What is the deal with Disney and their use of gay stereotypes over the years?
Well, I don't think they do it consciously. Not really. They're mostly just using a trope with some unfortunate implications, and they're not the first. Most of these characters are fops. This is a trope that's been around since old-timey England, and most modern fops are English, even if they're not actually anywhere near England.
They're vain, pretentious, effeminate, obsessed with fashion. Fops are usually a source of comic relief, but they're also often the villain. Adding foppish qualities is a good way to make your bad guy both detestable and non-threatening to a general audience.
Some of them even have freaking pigtails.
When they see how I glitter.
Before we even know that this guy wants to wipe out the Native Americans, we already hate him because of his stupid gay haircut. I think that producers go in with the intention of making their villains vain, weak, and cowardly, and somewhere along the line, that turns into making them ridiculously effeminate. They use stereotypes as a shorthand to get across the idea of a gay person without ever making it explicit.
But is it really fair to label these characters as gay just because we're going on these gay stereotypes? And besides, just because someone acts somewhat effeminately in real life doesn't mean they're necessarily gay.
Fair point. These characters aren't demonstrably gay, they're coded gay. Sometimes it's intentional, but sometimes it's up to the viewer to interpret the code for themselves, and they might not always intersect with the author's intention. But what's important is that that is what the audience perceives, whether they realize it or not. Again, I doubt that Disney ever goes, hey, let's make our bad guy a big fat homo, but they take advantage of many of the same tropes used by people who did more or less exactly that, maybe without even realizing it. Let's make our bad guy effeminate and vain and have pigtails and a mustache, and I bet that'll make him seem deviant and depraved for some reason.
Disney is hardly malicious in this regard, just maybe a little bit thoughtless. They tend to assign their characters stereotypical traits without fully considering the implications.
But on the other hand, you have other coded characters who aren't on Team Evil.
What do you want me to do? Dress and drag and do the hula?
Timon and Pumbaa aren't exactly foppish, but they for sure have some sort of domestic partnership going on.
Hey, Pumbaa, not in front of the kids.
Oh, sorry.
Even making a case for same-sex parenthood, and it's their flamboyancy that makes them likable.
Oh, some bacon! Yup.
Their silly, effeminate ways make them non-threatening and therefore likable and funny to children. There's also the genie who, well...
Look at me from the side. Do I look different to you?
Even though he doesn't want Aladdin to think he's gay.
I'm getting kind of fond of you, kid. Not that I want to pick out curtains or anything.
You also have Hermes from Hercules. He thinks this party is fabulous.
Fabulous party. You know, I haven't seen this much love in a room since Narcissus discovered himself.
And Turkina from Tarzan, who hates dressing like a lady and happens to be voiced by an out lesbian.
So, in your expert opinion, what is the difference between the good guys coded gay and the bad guys coded gay?
Well, to me the difference is that with characters like Timon and Pumbaa, there's no pretense. Their signature song basically translates to, F it, we're just gonna be ourselves. We eat bugs, and we don't really care what anyone thinks about that. Meanwhile, Jafar's off like, man, I wanna marry a lady. I'm so into ladies, you guys. I definitely don't have a crush on this guy I keep pursuing who wears an open vest.
You find that, as a general rule, people get a little cagey about same-sex relationships in children's media. There's a perception among some parts of society that same-sex relationships are more sexual than heterosexual relationships. Anytime anyone so much as mentions the fact that gay people exist in any sort of context that involves children, there are invariably outcries of, they're too young, you're teaching kids about gay sex, stop trying to recruit them into your sodomy cult.
That argument doesn't even really deserve to be dignified, especially when you consider the number of Disney movies that end with a marriage, a straight marriage. Is that teaching kids about straight sex? And what effect do you think all that heteronormativity has on kids? Here's a hint. It doesn't turn them straight. More to the point, LGBT people could gain greater visibility in a medium that up to this point has made them practically invisible at its best and outright vilified at its worst. Because Fox News does make one valid point. The media affects people. It affects the way people perceive society and each other. And if this is how we're treating gay people in our kids' movies, how can we expect them to be treated in real life?
The previous video by Nostalgia Chick and Rantasmo is a brilliant fan-made video that covered an introduction to queer villainy. What is important to pay attention to is the coding, that is how the characters are represented. Many male villains are feminized while the female villains are masculinized. The reversal of these gender roles sets up the villains in stark opposition to the heroes and provides a visual otherness for the audience to recognize who is different from the rest. The next section, technological platforms and fandoms as agents of processes and discoveries, will be covered by Ray, and I'll return after that to conclude with the social impact of Let It Go.